What's going on, everybody? It's Joel here, and today we're going to be comparing the Metcon 7 versus all of the other Metcons. Alright, so I lied a little bit in the intro. We're actually only going to be comparing the Metcon 7 today to the more recent Metcons, and by Metcons I mean like more of the flagship Metcon, so not the free Metcon. Not like the Metcon Sport or any of those random ones, but we're talking about the Metcon 5s and Metcon 6s, which are basically the same shoe. There wasn't a huge upgrade between either of them. So if you still have the Metcon 5s, they're still going to be like pretty much the same thing as the Metcon 6. So you can take whatever I say in this, if I'm talking about the Metcon 6, and apply it to the 5s. And then the Metcon React Turbo, which was probably my favorite shoe from earlier in the year until the Metcon 7 came out. So the big spoiler alert here is that the Metcon 7, in my opinion, is still, no matter what, this is the best shoe for training right now. It, for me, beats out the Metcon React Turbo, it beats out the Metcon 6, and it beats the Metcon 5. But if you have any of those other shoes, I still think that they're still really good and you don't necessarily need to upgrade to the Metcon 7. So to break it down for you, we're going to talk about not really the construction, because I mean, if you wanted to hear about that, you could just go review some of my past videos. We're really just going to talk about how they perform in certain situations and how much better like the Metcon 7 is going to be over some of the other ones, why I would choose it over some of the other ones, and what I think the other ones are better for over the Metcon 7. So when it comes down to it, it's a game of being the most well-balanced. So in my opinion, I think the Metcon 7s are the most well-balanced one. They're not the best for everything, or they're not the absolute best at anything, but they're really good, really good at everything. So when it comes down to, let's say, fit, this one's going to be kind of subjective. Kind of depends on how you like your shoes. So I do hear a complaint about the Metcon 7s feeling too bulky, and I can see that. They are a little bit more bulky than the previous iterations of Metcons, especially if you're coming from the more stripped down Metcon 6 and even the Metcon React Turbos, which kind of feel like a sock on your foot. The Metcon 7s, to me, feel more like a slipper on your foot. A very snug slipper. They hug your feet pretty well, and I really like that about them. I think the Metcon React Turbos do fit as well. If you wanted something that fit a little bit more minimal, maybe didn't feel like it had so much of an upper around your foot, then I'd probably still go with the Metcon React Turbos. Or if you wanted something that was a little bit wider in the toe box, then I would go with the Metcon 6s. I think the Metcon 6s have the widest toe box, most open toe box, and if you cared about breathability, I think the Metcon 6s are probably the way to go. The Metcon 5s have a similar style fit to the Metcon 7s. So if you're coming from the Metcon 5s to the Metcon 7s and you didn't have a problem with that, then I think that you would still like the fit of the Metcon 7s, because it's pretty similar in how they hug your foot. So when it comes down to like running, I actually think the Metcon 5s and 6s are the best for running. They have a pretty soft forefoot. They're really flexible. They're not the lightest, but they're all very similar. Like these ones clock in at like high 12 ounces for a men's size 10. The Metcon 7s are like a low 12 ounce shoe, and then the React Turbos are under 12 ounces. So the lightest ones are going to be the React Turbos, but I didn't really think that they were the best for running, because the midsole on the React Turbos is not that soft. It's actually pretty firm. It's pretty similar, to be honest, to like the Metcon 4s. So if you didn't like running in the Metcon 4s because of how stiff the midsole was, you probably won't like running in the Metcon React Turbos. But what I will say is that the React Turbos are more flexible than the Metcon 4s, so it does make them a little bit easier to run in, though I didn't really prefer running in these. The Metcon 7s are pretty good to run in unless you're a really heavy heel striker, you're gonna really feel that back plate. Like if I make myself step down hard on my heel, it's pretty jarring to step down on that. I typically run with more of like a mid-foot, forefoot strike, so I actually do like running in the Metcon 7 as well. I don't think it's better though than in the Metcon 5 and 6s, which are a little bit softer in the forefoot, and also, in my opinion, a little bit more flexible throughout the whole shoe, versus like the Metcon 7 is not flexible in the mid to rear foot, whereas the Metcon 5 and 6s, they flex a little bit better throughout the whole shoe. So do keep that in mind when you're doing like running. I think the 5s and 6s, or if you're looking for a shoe for running, the 5s and 6s, in my opinion, are going to be better. And then my next pick would be the Metcon 7s and then the React Turbos, which honestly are not terrible to run in. I just don't really prefer them. For plyometric movements, I think actually the React Turbos are probably the best ones. They're light on your feet. They're flexible throughout the whole shoe. I'm looking for more of a responsive shoe for plyometric movements when I'm like doing dynamic like box jump rebounding, even burpees. I thought the Metcon React Turbos were very, very comfortable and very good to use for plyometrics. I would follow that up with the Metcon 7s because of the React midsole. It's a little bit more responsive, it's a little bit more bouncy, just like it is on the React Turbos. It's actually a little bit softer in the forefoot on the Metcon 7 than the actual just midsole in general on the Turbos. And then you do get some pretty good cushioning from the insole of the Metcon 7s. I do like the way that they fit. It feels like my foot is a little bit more secure in the Metcon 7s. So my second pick would be the Metcon 7s, not far behind the Metcon React Turbos. And then the last ones would be the Metcon 5 and 6, but like I said, last isn't that far behind any of these shoes. And the reason for that with the Metcon 5 and 6 is that the forefoot is a little bit squishy and a little bit dull feeling. It's a little less responsive than the other shoes with the React midsole. And that's the reason why I would choose the other two shoes in particular over these ones. So when it comes to stability, I think that the Metcon 7s are the most stable of the bunch. This TPU heel plate, the Hyperlift that they put in this, is rock solid. And I think from the heel to the midfoot, you can't really do any better than on the Metcon 7. These are really good shoes to lift in. And I mean, I'm gonna say it once again, even though they have a stated, I mean, from multiple sources, people are saying that they have a 7mm drop. They don't feel like they have a 7mm drop. They feel just as flat as any other, maybe even flatter than every other Metcon. I mean, that's just what I feel when I use them to lift in. So I never feel like I'm like, my heel's too elevated or I get pitched forward in them. I feel like I'm nice and planted. Maybe it's because the heel is so solid on these shoes that I think the Metcon 7s, if you're looking for just a pure lifting shoe, there's really no better in my opinion. Plus the grip on these is really, really good. And then they have that same outsole geometry that they kind of use on the Romaleos, where it has a few different points. So you get better contact area with the ground without really like increasing the overall width of these shoes. But when it comes down to like the bulkiness of the shoes, the Metcon 7s are definitely going to be the biggest in terms of bulk out of all of them. You can kind of see it right here. But next up, I would choose the Metcon React Turbos. I think that these ones have a very consistent feeling midsole. Like I said, it feels very similar to the Metcon 4. It's not a soft drop-in midsole, and that's why I really like the Metcon React Turbos. To me, they felt very stable. I had no issues hitting any lifts in these shoes. Just like the Metcon 7, I just felt a little bit better in the Metcon 7. I just did some deadlifts yesterday, and I did feel like I was, the power delivery was a little bit better with the Metcon 7s. The midsole, or the drop-in midsole on the Turbos, does give a little bit. So under like pretty extreme loads, it'll give. Like moderate loads, I think it'll be fine. We're talking like, I mean like heavier loads, meaning like 500-pound deadlifts. But that's about where it starts squishing up a little bit. For the Metcon 5 and 6, I thought lifting in these was great. I never really had any issues with lifting in the Metcon 5s and 6s, but I didn't like the forefoot of these shoes. It was too soft, in my opinion, and too dull. It wasn't super responsive. And the only thing that I really wish that they improved on this shoe was just a little bit more of a tactile feeling forefoot, other than like being a dull forefoot. The heel on these shoes is actually very solid, but like with any weightlifting or powerlifting or pretty much any lifting movement, you're gonna need to have your forefoot on the ground as well. And I think the difference in feel between the forefoot and the rear foot of the shoe is a little bit too extreme, and it's almost a little distracting when you lift in these. Not saying that they're bad, or not saying that I've ever missed a lift because of that, but it's just the way that it feels. I just don't prefer going for my heaviest loads in the 5s and 6s, whereas with the 7s and the React Turbos, I'd have absolutely no issues. Now, when it comes to using the Hyperlift insert, let me pull one out of here for you. I'm in this bag right here. So, you can use the Hyperlifts on any Metcon that has a drop-in midsole, and that's how they kind of market it. But I found that if you really wanted to, you could just stick these under the insole of the Metcon 7s. If you felt like the heel on the Metcon 7s was lacking in heel height, you could just slip one of these in there. If you had any of the, or if you had the 5s and 6s, because that's all this came with, then you can use it on that shoe as well. So if you were a fan of these, that's a good little piece of information to know. So finally, when it comes down to just like the actual value of the shoe, this is where things get a little tricky, because these are all really, really good training shoes. And at the moment, like, you can't really find 5s anymore, so we'll just throw that out there. But you can kind of include that with like the 6 grouping, which now you can get the 6s for pretty cheap, like 80 bucks. I mean, I went to the outlet store and these were 60 bucks. That's kind of like a no-brainer if you're looking for a brand new pair of training shoes. And even if you had like a stockpile of 5 or 6s, they're still really, really good. And I don't think that you necessarily need to upgrade right now, unless you just wanted the latest and greatest in shoes, to the 5 or the Metcon 7s or the React Turbos. And in this whole comparison, I would pick the React Turbos as my second pick. Just speaking about the shoes in general, but when it comes down to the overall value, the React Turbos are the last ones, because they cost $150. There's a premium on these ones for, you know, I mean, just because they're meant to take the place of the Flyknits from before. But I don't think that they do anything that much better than the 6s. So if you were to buy like a full price pair of Metcon React Turbos over an $80 pair of Metcon 6s, you wouldn't be getting double the performance out of the React Turbos. So that's kind of the weird spot that the React Turbos are in right now. And furthermore, if you're looking to buy the Metcon 7s versus the React Turbos, I think the Metcon 7s are the better shoe for, I mean, the retail price of $130. You don't need to spend the extra $20 on the React Turbos. The only reason why I think people would spend, or people would want to spend, or you should spend the difference in price versus the 7s versus the Turbos, is because you didn't like the way that the Metcon 7s look. Because that's really the only thing that differentiates the two, in my opinion. I think that the Metcon 7s do just about everything better than the React Turbos. And for the price, I think the Metcon 6s are still probably the best ones right now. Like you can do everything in the Metcon 6s just fine, really well. They're still a top tier shoe. They were my top tier shoe from last year. And even though the Metcon 7s are better, they're not like you need to run out right now, buy a new pair of shoes better. And that's just real talk, like speaking between all of these shoes. And just going with all of them, or going and working out with all of them, like I am spoiled because I get to try out all these shoes and all the time. But for the normal person, the best buy right now is still the Metcon 6. At a discounted price, these for 80 bucks are an amazing training shoe. And then if you're gonna pay full price, then I'm gonna go with the Metcon 7. The Metcon 7 is the best training shoe at the moment. This is my favorite training shoe. I still think it is amazing. But like I said, I don't think that you need to run out and buy it at this very moment. Unless you like really needed a new pair of shoes or something. But yeah, man, that's pretty much it. A little bit of objectivity and a little bit of subjectivity in this video. It really just comes down to like what you want to spend on a pair of shoes and what you're looking for in a pair of shoes. I think the best overall shoe is the Metcon 7. I think the best value shoe is the Metcon 6, which is still very, very good. And I think the Metcon React Turbos fall in a weird spot. I think they're probably second best in performance after the Metcon 7 if you're not looking to do any kind of rope climbing. But I think that the difference in price between all of these, it's just not worth it over the Metcon 7 and the Metcon 6. So if you guys had any questions about any of these shoes that we talked about today, feel free to leave them in the comments section. And as always, guys, if you like this video, hit that thumbs up button, subscribe to my channel for all the latest, greatest CrossFit and fitness reviews, and I will catch you guys in the next video. Peace.